My name is Miller. I'm just a typical 25-year-old office worker, living alone away from my parents' house. Originally from the countryside, I moved to New York for work, and now I'm working as an accountant at a certain trading company. And I have a boyfriend of 1 year. His name is Johnson. He's 27. Johnson used to be a salesman at a trading company that occasionally visited my office. Initially, we would just exchange polite greetings, but we discovered we're from the same state, and from then on, we hit it off. He also moved to New York for work. Would you like to grab a meal sometime? Sure, let's go. I started getting invited out on dates. Would you mind giving me your number? Yes, of course. And so, we started going out. Then, on our first anniversary, he proposed. It seemed like the perfect timing. I liked Johnson, and I thought it would be nice to be together forever. There was no reason to decline. Yes, I replied, and Johnson began to tell me about his family background. Actually, my family runs a company. Is that so? So I plan to quit my current job and eventually return to the family business. It's called Johnson Paper. Ever heard of it? I do. It's a big company. Right. Everyone in the area knows about it. They even have TV commercials. I never expected that Johnson's family would own that Johnson Paper company. That company is well known, ranking in the top 10 companies in the state. The current president is the second generation, so could Johnson possibly be the third? Well, so Johnson, you're the heir. Well, something like that. Miller, you're lucky to have been chosen by me. His proud attitude made me smile awkwardly. Was Johnson always like this? And if he plans to return to the family business, why didn't he tell me before proposing? It was the first time I felt uneasy about Johnson. What would happen to my job if we got married? I had told Johnson that I wanted to gain experience as an accountant in a regular company and eventually help my father in the real estate business. Was he going to take all that into consideration? I wanted to ask, but I hesitated, thinking maybe Johnson had some plans. Since he didn't rush me to quit my job, returning back to his family home might still be far off. We could talk about it in the future. That's what I thought, but Johnson started changing little by little after that day. Or rather, his true colors gradually emerged. He began boasting about his family's wealth. I've never had to work hard for money. Employees at the company call me the young master and always treat me well. So Miller, you'll benefit from it too. Even though he said such things, I didn't feel happy at all. Rather, I started feeling disgusted by Johnson's bragging about his family's wealth. Why did you work at your current company before taking over the family business? That's obvious, isn't it? For the experience. Well, I got in there because of my old man's connections. Oh, by the way, I bought another car. Well, using my old man's, or rather, the company's money. Until now, Johnson never showed any signs of arrogance. But suddenly, it felt like he was a different person, his words piercing like thorns. I used to love Johnson for his humility and simplicity. Is it really okay to marry him? With no mention of taking over the company or returning to his hometown, my distrust only grew. But since I accepted his proposal, I couldn't bring myself to reconsider. About a month after accepting the proposal, I visited Johnson's parents. Their house was a 3-story mansion, truly befitting a prestigious family. Expensive artwork adorned the spacious garden, and colorful fish swam in the pond. One of these fish cost tens of thousands. This one even won a national award. Johnson boasted, but it didn't quite impress me. He owned 6 luxury cars like Benz and Ferrari, all bought with company money. Did he really need to mention that? But isn't there something odd about that? Doubts crept in. Inside, Johnson introduced me to his parents. What do your parents do, Miller? Johnson's mother immediately inquired. My father works in real estate, I replied. To which Johnson's father rudely remarked, not a respectable job. How disrespectful, especially for a first meeting. What's wrong with a job in real estate? Though infuriated, I couldn't afford to sour the atmosphere. Just go along with it. Just go along with it. Just smile and nod along. Well. Can't be helped. Unlike us, they're just commoners. Exactly, Dad. It's rude to say something like that even to mere commoners. What are they even saying? I was speechless. Their elitist attitude, the idea that they can't talk to lower class people. The lack of malice in their conversation was even scarier. They probably think this is normal. I felt like I stumbled into a different dimension, nausea rising in me. I couldn't possibly get along with this family. Those anxieties swirled in my mind. By the way, Miller, you work in accounting, right? Yes, that's correct. Well then, after the marriage, you can work for us, Johnson's father interjected. It's a personal request from the CEO. You're lucky, Miller, Johnson's mother added. We're counting on you, Miller. Before I could interject, the conversation kept going. Seeing Johnson happily chatting with his parents, I looked at him in despair. Wait a minute. I just wanted to say. Desperately trying to interject, but nobody seems to listen. With that, the conversation came to an end for the day. Alone with Johnson, I decided to confront the lingering questions about our future. When are you going back to your parents' house? As soon as we get married. So, Miller, you better start preparing too. Wait a second, I haven't agreed to anything. I mentioned going back to my parents' house, right? Well, yes, but I thought that was something we'd discuss later. And besides, I have no intention of quitting my job. The conversation wasn't going smoothly at all. Wait, why? You'd be happier working at our company, right? It's bigger than your current company. But I don't intend to quit my job right away. Even if you say that, working at our company would be more secure and easier than at that company, don't you think? I didn't like Johnson's attitude of thinking he could have everything his way and belittling my company. I started to lose interest in marrying him. Those feelings grew stronger and stronger. The day after I talked to Johnson about it, his mother called me personally. Miller, I heard that you don't want to be involved with our company. We can't accept someone like you as our daughter-in-law. But I don't want to quit my job right away. An accounting job is the same anywhere, isn't it? I was scolded by Johnson's mother in a harsh tone, and I felt intimidated. Anyway, come over here this week and explain it to the president properly. Got it. I felt overwhelmed as I hung up the phone. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get really messy. That weekend, when I visited Johnson's parents' house, they sat with their arms crossed, glaring at me. Johnson, are you sure? Is she really someone you want to marry? We don't need someone uncooperative like her in our family. Johnson's parents said whatever they wanted. When Johnson heard that, he came to me in tears, saying, Miller, please, quit your job and come live with me. But I couldn't bring myself to accept. I want to continue working at my current job. Please understand my position. But if you stay in New York, you can't live a married life together, can you? Well, that's true, but do you really want to get married? When asked again, I couldn't honestly say yes. Seeing my indecisive attitude, Johnson's parents had had enough. That's it. Leave now. I was finally kicked out of Johnson's house. For a while after that, I didn't hear from Johnson. I resigned myself to the idea that if the marriage couldn't happen, as long as things didn't get worse, it would be fine, and I felt a little relieved. Then, about 2 weeks later, Johnson called me with a serious tone. My parents want to meet. They want you to come over to our place this weekend with your parents. They want to talk about the future. I knew what it meant. It was over. Despite hesitating about marriage, I still loved Johnson. So when I heard those words, tears welled up in my eyes. I thought we could be happy together. Why did we have to have so many misunderstandings between us? What should I have done differently? No matter how much I asked myself, I couldn't find an answer. It was over. I resigned myself to that fact. I took some time off and went back to my parents' house. I had told my parents about the proposal, but I hadn't told them about what happened afterward. They had asked about the wedding date and meeting Johnson's parents, but I had been evasive with my answers. I felt like I had to tell them everything, so I did. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry for keeping quiet. I think the engagement is off. What? What happened? Why is it off? My parents were beyond shocked. I told them about Johnson's parents, his change in attitude, and how they treated me. My parents could sense my pain. They're selfish people. Absolutely. They showed understanding and hugged me. If it's going to be cancelled, it's better to discuss it together properly. Yay, it's good to know things before getting married. With my parents' words, the tension that had been building up until then suddenly dissipated, and large tears streamed down my cheeks. Miller, there are plenty of men out there. Don't worry about it. Encouraged by my mother, I managed to regain my spirits. For me, breaking off the engagement isn't so bad. Since I wasn't sure about marriage, it's actually the right decision. Thinking that way lightened my heart, but at the same time, anger toward the Johnson family surged within me. They had belittled us so much, I couldn't let them off the hook. And then, the day to visit his family arrived. Johnson's parents greeted me with disdain, as if looking down on commoners. They didn't even offer tea or asked us to sit down. Miller, all the talk about marriage, forget everything. Johnson started the conversation matter-of-factly, without a hint of remorse. As expected, I calmly handled the situation unfolding before me. I said nothing, just looked at Johnson. Then, his parents, egging him on, began openly discussing how unsuitable I was for the Johnson family, and how I wasn't fit for Johnson paper. Miller, someone like you who isn't willing to serve her husband. We come from a noble background, so honestly, your daughter isn't. My father, who had been quiet until then, suddenly interrupted them and erupted in anger like a raging fire. What do you mean? Please speak clearly instead of beating around the bush. Perhaps they didn't like his attitude, as their expressions instantly turned fierce. Can't you read between the lines without having us say it outright? You paupers, we won't accept a marriage with peasants from the countryside. How dare they say such rude things in public? I was beyond angry. I was disgusted. Even my parents sighed and exchanged glances. There was no point in saying anything further. I realized that. I see. Then we'll leave. Let's go, Miller. Yes. At my father's words, I stood up. As we were leaving, I left them with a parting shot. Johnson, I hope you won't regret this. Then, one day, about 2 weeks later, my parents received a call from Johnson's side. Johnson's father, in a panicked voice, interrogated my father. What does this mean? I'm not sure what you mean. You didn't want to have to deal with poor people, right? I will not be renewing the lease you have with us. What are you saying? A big company like Johnson Paper wouldn't want to be associated with a rural family like ours. It would be a shame to you. My father runs a real estate company. He has quite a wide range of businesses and many companies as clients. One of them is Johnson Paper. My father owns about 100 parking spaces for the employees of Johnson Paper's factory, as well as part of the factory grounds. If that contract were terminated, Johnson Paper's operations would come to a halt. The panic in Johnson's father's voice was understandable. Why hadn't Johnson's father remembered my father, who was his business partner? As a business owner, he was incompetent. To do this all of a sudden would be a problem. If this happens, the company won't survive. We're also a business. Since there's a possibility we won't be able to collect rent, we can't rent it out. What's going on? We've been paying the rent properly, haven't we? You'll understand eventually. Anyway, the deadline is at the end of the next 2 months. You have more than 2 months, so why don't you find a new place? Johnson's father was speechless at my father's well-organized response. I will never forgive you for insulting my daughter. With that, my father hung up the phone. A few days later, the Internal Revenue Service raided Johnson Paper and the president's home. There were suspicions of tax evasion, and turns out it was all illegal. While Johnson's family's fish and car were purchased with company money, all the assets were registered under the president's name, not the company's. He had been pocketing company profits without authorization. The charges included tax evasion, breach of trust, and embezzlement. Although he somehow avoided criminal charges, he ended up paying nearly $1 billion in back taxes, fines, and penalties. My family had carefully discussed how we would seek revenge against them. The fact that the land owned by my father, which was lent to Johnson Paper, was a crucial part of the plan. Johnson's talk about buying a car with company money had raised suspicions of tax evasion. We consulted with lawyers about canceling the lease contract and reported the tax evasion allegations to the Internal Revenue Service. One could say it was a revenge plot devised by someone familiar with the company's accounting, namely, my father. It later became known that Johnson's father was rumored to be a lousy president. He had inherited the company from his grandfather but lacked both business talent and knowledge, running the company with a reckless management typical of a second-generation prodigal son. and he had caused a fatal scandal by committing tax evasion. The company's reputation plummeted, contracts were terminated, and there was a wave of resignations among employees, putting the business in dire straits. My father had anticipated this outcome and had terminated the contract early. Amidst the turmoil, I received a call from Johnson. I thought it would be an apology, but to my surprise, it was a request to reconcile. "Hey Miller, can't we start over?" "Huh? What are you talking about now? Come on, please. My family's in serious trouble right now. Please help us out." What a joke. Why would you ask a poor person like me for help? I quit the company too, and if things continue like this, I might end up in dire straits. Can't you at least ask your dad to lend us the land? That would be impossible. My father isn't running a charity. I coldly rebuffed him. After that, while Johnson Paper managed to avoid bankruptcy, it was refused loans from banks, and it continued to struggle. Nevertheless, it's surprising how easily they fell from grace. It's clear as day how sloppy their management was and how they hadn't thought of any contingency plans for emergencies. A family that arrogantly looked down on others, considering themselves upper class because of their grandfather's legacy. I intend to see through to the end of their downfall. Since then, I completely cut off contact with Johnson. I didn't want to be depended on, and above all, I wanted to forget everything quickly. And now, I've started dating a new man I've met. He's kind and respects others well. There are plenty of men out there. I'm holding on to my mother's words. "Miller, would you consider going out with me with marriage in mind?" A delightful confession from him. I'm a bit wary of the word marriage, but he didn't say anything and just hugged me. I want to live and find happiness with him from now on.